I'd like to talk to you today about a concept from my forthcoming book, Stepping Up: How Taking Responsibility Changes Everything. What I want to talk about are two numbers, 100 and 0, two numbers that I believe are game changers. You see, I've been talking about this concept of 100-0 for over a decade, and it gets more response among my clients than almost any other concept I've ever talked about. The two numbers stand for 100% responsibility and 0 excuses. You see, I think all of us would be more successful and most companies would be transformed if we took those two numbers seriously. We've all met 0-100 people. Nothing is ever their fault and they have every excuse for why they can't succeed or didn't win. 100-0 is about not blaming the constraints and not focusing on our excuses. I think of the story of Joanne Beaton, who took over a dying business for TELUS, one of the largest telecommunications companies in the world. She took over operator services, the people who say, "Information please, would you like to place a call?" The kind of people that even we as laymen know will one day be replaced by computers. When Joanne took over the business, she had one of the most disengaged staff in the entire company, a business that was hemorrhaging money, and basically every other company in her business was trying to get out of that business because you couldn't make money at it. Her boss had a simple instruction: Joanne, cut costs and get us out of that business. Now, Joanne had every reason not to take 100% responsibility and every excuse for why she couldn't succeed, but that's not what she did. Instead, she went to her people and she challenged them. She said, no one else is going to save this business but ourselves. So she said, don't point to the company, don't blame the market. Let's ask, what could we do to make this successful? And that's exactly what they did. As they began to take responsibility, the path became clear. They realized they would either get outsourced or they would become the outsourced to. They would either continue to get worse or they could become the best, most effective, cost-efficient, and customer-focused operator services in the world. And they believed if they did, if they fixed themselves, they could create a winning business. Well, guess what happened? They created a profit center out of a dying business. If you want to create a great career, adopt the 100-0 right now. Always take full responsibility. Never focus on your excuses. 100% responsibility means focusing on what you can do to fix something, whether it's your fault or not. 0 excuses means not focusing on why you can't succeed, but instead asking what can you do to succeed. Chances are, by the way, your boss or your client already know about the constraints, and the excuses may all be real, but none of them are useful. This concept of 100-0 is so powerful that after about half of my talks, the company I speak to adopts some form of the 100-0 as a company philosophy within a month or two of my leaving. Imagine for a moment how a company would be different if every person said, I'm 100% responsible for morale, for service, for the brand. Imagine how a relationship or a career would be different when a person, instead of asking how someone else can help them, begin to just say, how can I help myself? Now, if you'd like to see a clip from a talk I gave on Stepping Up, just keep on watching this video. Meanwhile, I'd love to talk to you about how this concept of 100-0 can help your clients. And I'll guarantee you something, having given hundreds of talks on this subject, this talk is a winner. Corporate audiences love this talk. And I'd love to talk to you about how we can help your clients create a place of 100% responsibility in their company. Thanks again for taking the time to watch this. And then I love what she said to me. She said, if someone wants to be the teacher of the year, the pharmacist of the year, the optometrist, the optician of the year, she said, the husband or wife of the year, the parent of the year, she said, every year just have one thing you're working on being fundamentally better at. And I'd ask you right now, what do you want to be fundamentally better at your job? What do you want to be fundamentally better at as a parent, as a spouse? You know, I don't know if any of you play a musical instrument. I always wanted to learn to play a musical instrument, and so, but I tried guitar a couple of times, but I had a fatal flaw. I never practiced. Any of you ever do that? You know, you go to the lessons, and I'd come back the next week, and the instructor would say, well, you haven't improved at all. Well, did you practice? Well, no. And honestly, the reason is because I'm an extrovert. I don't know about any of you in the room. I'm kind of an extrovert. I don't really like sitting around practicing by myself. So a friend of mine said, after all these years, said, John, you should take up the African drum. He said, because it's an extrovert's instrument. You know, you don't kind of play by yourself. You don't even have to learn to read music. You just got to kind of feel it in your bones, right? And then, of course, another friend said, well, of course, you know what they call people who like to hang out with musicians, don't you? And I said, what? He said, drummers. But anyway, so I sign up in the hippie district of my city. I sign up for a weekly drumming class, right, on Saturday afternoons, right? And I show up the first night, and there's me and about 25 hippies from 17 to 75, tie-dyed, dreadlocked, and Birkenstocked. Of course, I told my best friend that story, and he said, well, they had a different story. They said, honey, how was the class? He said, well, it was 25 normal people and one button-down stiff guy. But anyway. And I learned two things in that class. The first thing I learned is that it's not as easy as it looks to learn to play the African drum, the djembe. The second thing I learned is after a couple of weeks, the class naturally divided. On the right side sat the good drummers. And on the left seat, just by osmosis, sat the bad drummers. And I'm over here with the bad drummers. And as the weeks go by, I'm getting worse and worse. They're getting better and better. The teacher, after a few weeks, gives up on this side of the room. He pretty much only gives feedback over here. Every once in a while, he just says to us, will you guys stop for a while so these guys can? And after about 6 or 8 weeks of this, I came to a very important, simple, but profound conclusion. I was never going to get any better sitting with the bad drummers. So the next week, I come over and I sit between two of the best drummers. They give me this strange look like, what are you doing on this side? You have not graduated to the good drummer side. But there's no rules, so I'm sitting there with the good drummers. A funny thing begins to happen. First of all, I look to my right, somebody's doing it really well. I look to my left, somebody's doing it really well. The second thing is on the break, the good drummers start to say, you know, I can see you're really trying. Can I show you what you're doing? I mean, I've been watching you. I know what you're doing. The teacher suddenly can't ignore me anymore because I'm messing up the good drummers now, right? So he'll say, John, just wait a minute. Let me show you. And he said, halfway through, like one of the classes, he says, John, you know, he said, I got to tell you, you remind me of me. He said, all through music school, I was always like the guy who couldn't get it. He said, but I would stay and I would practice and I would practice. He said, good for you, keep it up. And the interesting thing is I started asking for feedback. I started saying, Russell, that's the teacher, I know I'm doing it wrong. I'd say to the good drummers, look, Bob, I know I'm doing it wrong. What am I doing? And if you want to make a commitment to grow, let me challenge you to ask people how you're doing. Ask your colleagues, especially the ones who are the really good drummers. What do you notice about how I am with patience? What do you notice about the way I am in terms of how I treat colleagues? What do you notice about the way I'm showing up at work that I could improve? Start asking your kids if you've got teenagers. How many of you have children, by the way? Yeah? How many of you were children at some time in your life? Yeah? You know, I have teenagers. You know the wonderful thing about teenagers? By the time they're teenagers, they know what you need to do to be a better parent. But when's the last time you sat down with them and said, give it to me, no holds barred? What do I need to do to be a better parent? I did that with my kids when all three were teenagers. One's 23 now. And I asked them, I sat down and said, I want to know, what do I need to do to be a better dad? And because I travel a lot, I expected them to say, you know, Dad, we want you to travel less, be home more. You know what they said? They said, look, we respect your work. We've all seen you speak. We admire what you do. We know you make a difference in people's lives. You're not home as much as many dads, but here's the deal. When you're home, we want you to really be home. We don't want you to be checking voicemails. We don't want to be emailing. We don't want you to ask us how our day was and then not listen. We want you to really be here. And I give you some great advice. When someone gives you feedback at work, in your life, your husband, your wife, your kids, there's only two appropriate responses when someone gives you feedback. Here's those two responses. Thank you. Tell me more. You know, you're a little abrupt with the patients sometime, with the customers. Thank you. tell me more. You know, sometimes, even though you're a great colleague, you come in and when you've had a bad day, you kind of take it out on us. Thank you, tell me more. Honey, I wish you would stop driving that way. Thank you, tell me more. It's not always easy. My wife and I do that now. I go, thank you, tell me more, and then she shuts up. So it's just kind of a little game we have. Thank you, tell me more. When's the last time you asked for that heartfelt feedback? And when you go and you get that performance review, those of you who get a performance review, instead of going in and thinking, oh man, I got to sit through this again, ask more questions. If they give you a great review, say, that's great, I'm glad I'm a star, I'm glad I'm doing well, but what do I need to improve? What would make me even better? Because like that teacher, Helen O'Donnell, the path to greatness, whether it's in our personal lives or in our work lives, is that we never stop growing. We make that commitment to continue to grow, to continue to learn.